All right, welcome everyone and to our special closed session of Solvang City Council for January 24th, 2022. It is called a meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante.
Here.
Councilmember Rona.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas.
Here.
Mayor Urick.
Here. Councilmember Clark, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Yes, please stand against your right hand over your heart. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Now, first we'll go out to public communications. Madam Clerk, would you please read the admonitions on the public communications?
This section is intended to provide members of the public with the opportunity to comment on closed session items or any subject that does not appear on this agenda for action. This section is limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker will be afforded 3 minutes and may speak only once.
So, I will take it out to the audience. Stand back, everyone. Please stand back. There's no one there. Bring it back to anyone on Zoom wishing to speak at this time. Seeing none, we'll recess to closed session at 6:02. Do you need to read?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54-956.9 Subdivision D, for the City Council meet closed session on one matter of anticipated litigation.
Thank you. 6:02 for closed session. I should have recused myself. David, when do you think I should recuse myself?
Well, you already did.
We were number 9.
I can do it. Are we ready to roll? Good. All right. I'll reconvene this special closed session at 6:24. And council, would you
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
make
The
announcements? on-
City Council met in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54.956.9 subdivision D4 on one matter of anticipated litigation. I will note prior to reporting out that the mayor did not participate and recused himself due to having been employed in a capacity that might constitute a conflict with the topic of the closed session. So with that being said, there was no reportable action from the closed session.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will close the closed session at, yeah, at 6:25. You could go home. Good evening and welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Solvang City Council for Monday, January 24th, 2022. Now call the meeting to order at 6:30. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Clark.
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante.
Here.
Councilmember Arona. Here. Councilmember Thomas.
Here.
Mayor Urick.
Here. Councilmember Arona, would you please lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I'll be glad to.
Salute the flag and pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. And now, Madam Clerk, would you please read the admonition on the public communications?
This section is intended to provide members of the public with the opportunity to comment on on items not on the agenda and consent calendar items. This section is limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker will be afforded 3 minutes and may speak only once.
All right. So we'll go out to public comment right now. Anyone in the audience wish to speak on any items that are not on the agenda or that are on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to out in Zoom land or telephone. And don't see anybody's hand.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
this is Lieutenant Green. And now would be the opportunity to provide you guys with an update of our station.
Yes.
So I'm sorry that I'm not there, but I did want to reach out to you guys to let you know that although our station did suffer from that flood, we have evacuated the station. It will undergo repairs tomorrow due to supplies and other budgetary items that are up for it and increased grades that I want to do, upgrades. That, let me do this for you. There you go.
Oh, hello.
I did want to let you guys know though that we are operating out of the trailers. We're in the parking lot. There's been no disruption in service to you guys or the Solvang community, and there will be no disruption of service to any of the community in the area. So I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that. We're doing fine, and we appreciate everybody's help.
Thank you. I did want to ask, though, related to that, are the public supposed to still go to Buellton office for any reports or anything such as that, or are the trailers now in the parking lot available for public to go to?
Unfortunately, it makes more sense during COVID time. The trailers are not very big, and we weren't able to get an admin trailer without consuming more of the parking lot. We've already taken up quite a bit of it, and we're trying to work with the senior center there and not crowd them or the library. So because it's such a short distance, I elected to continue to operate our public face out of the Buellton office for now until repairs can be done, and then when we reopen, we'll resume in office there at Solvang.
Okay, great. Thank you for that update. Are there any others that would wish to speak out there in Zoom or on the telephone? I don't see any. Bringing it back. We have ceremonial items and commendations. City Manager, would you take that?
I would like to ask Trevor Hawley to step up to the podium for his Employee of the Quarter Award. Trevor, congratulations. This actually marks a whole year of this program. Trevor is the 4th Employee of the Quarter. He receives his photograph for the next quarter. That's him and his son, I believe, here.
That's cool.
Trevor is currently acting lead water operator at our wastewater treatment plant, and Trevor has been nominated by a number of employees as well as some folks in the community for all of the things that he's been doing for the community at the wastewater treatment plant, including dealing with the challenging COVID times and the fact that we had at one point hardly any staff at the wastewater treatment plant, and Trevor practically held it all on one man. while at the same time actually working on the wastewater treatment plant phase 1 project. So Trevor also took lead on that while many were either unable to be at work or had to be quarantined. So much thanks to Trevor, and thank you for currently being in the lead position and continue to contribute. You got lots of positive feedback, and for that you received the Employee Award here and also your Monetary Award for that. Hand it over. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Appreciate all the work. Sadly, we feel.
She's still smiling.
There we go.
Smile.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
You need to make me look taller now.
Thank you.
Speech. Yep, Trevor, on behalf of the city and all the residents and businesses, thank you. And on behalf of the council, thank you for all the work you did and continue to do. All right, no presentations and no proclamations today. We've already gone through public comments. Now let's move on to the city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I would like to start by reminding everybody that we have a workshop coming up here shortly, in just a few days. This Thursday, it will be the first community workshop for the next 2-year financial plan development. The workshop will take place here at the City of Solomon City Hall at 1644 Oak Street, and online participation via Zoom will also be available. So this workshop will be the beginning of receiving input from the community on the financial plan development. A survey has been posted online today, which we welcome everybody's input from the community to receive input about the goals and the priorities that should be included in the next 2 years' work programs. The next steps after that will be that on February 26th, the City Council will hold a goal-setting session. That meeting will take place at 10 a.m. It will also be here at the City Hall or by Zoom. Prior to that, on Thursday, we'll be discussing the availability of funds, the status of the current programs, the status of the projects for the capital improvement program, and we'll be looking at the questions and the process and how do we go about setting the goals on the 26th. So the 26th will set the sort of the highlights by the City Council for the community priorities and how we would focus and allocate funds over the next 2 years to achieve those priorities. All that input and the council policy direction will be taken by staff, and we'll start to develop a preliminary financial plan. In March and April timeframe, we'll be also reviewing any grant funding requests that will be coming in, as well as you have had a couple of asks from the large community-funded projects that are going on right now, which are the Senior Center new building and the Theater Fest remodel. So those requests will be brought to you in light of the financial plan development as well, so that you will have all the information you need at hand for availability of money in each operating fund and all of the priorities that will be in front of you. Then in May, we'll take all of that input and we'll present to you the preliminary financial plan for all operating programs and the capital improvement program, and receive your final feedback, which will be incorporated into the final financial plan document, which will be presented to you in June for final adoption and will go in effect in July. Also, another very important project that's going on right now is the utility rate study. We have done the preliminary analysis, which was presented to council, and we've done some tweaks based on the feedback that we received. But we are looking for really a communication and conversation with the community at the community workshop set specifically for the utility rates, which will take place on February 12th at 10 a.m. This workshop is proposed to be at the Veterans Hall, so we have more space. There will be some exhibits provided by utility staff to really explain our infrastructure, how our water and wastewater operates, and what are those needs. The city hasn't increased its utility rates since 2016. That is not typical. Typically, the rates need to continue to increase because the ongoing expenditures continue to increase, and we really need the rates to keep up with those expenditures. We also have a number of significant projects in both wastewater and water that will require the investment in infrastructure. And it is always timely to invest in infrastructure. Actually, in the long run, the more you invest ahead of time, the cheaper it is over time in terms of what you pay. So the next steps for utility rate study will be that on March 2022, the council will review final study recommendations and will set a Proposition 218 hearing. The presentation that will be presented to council at that time will take into consideration all of the study that we have been developing with the consultant that looks at the 10 years capital improvement needs as well as operating needs, and the community impact that we will collect on February 12th from the community. The community workshop on the 12th will be not a council formal session, but it will be rather a conversation between staff and the community, which will be presented to council in March. Then in April and May timeframe, we'll continue with public outreach and various meetings. In June 2022, there will be the Prop 218 hearing with a goal to implement the rates on July 1. We just had our workshop for the general plan update, which was the community workshop number 3. That took place on January 13th. We had approximately 40 participants who attended primarily virtually. It was a robust meeting. It's available to view at plansolving.com. We received a lot of really great feedback from the community, and we continue to ask for input through a survey. So even if you did attend the community workshop, please go ahead and submit a survey, and welcome to spread the word and have as much input as we can. The survey will be open through February 4th, at which point the survey will be closed. There's an alternative choices report that the community can read online as well to base their survey responses. All of that input will be put together and will be presented to City Council on February 14th for the City Council preliminary review of the report and the community input. This will be a policy conversation and general comments, which will then be presented to GPAC, which is the 15 members body that was appointed by staff and is not subject to Brown Act, but it's a body of individuals interested in this process whose purpose is to represent various aspects of solving. So we have a great community, great 15 volunteers on GPAC who have been very involved in this process. So all of that input will be taken to them in February for their review. And on March 7th, there would be, we're proposing to have a joint session with City Council and the Planning Commission to receive direction on a preferred alternative. So the preferred alternative here doesn't have to be any alternative that was presented in the draft alternatives report that's online. It can be any combination of that. So it's a process of having those 3 alternatives kind of presented. They're not recommended by staff or the consultant. They're just examples of the direction the city could decide to go. The GPAC will present recommendations which will ultimately go to the Planning Commission and City Council for approval. And based on that direction, staff and consultants will actually begin to develop each element of the general plan update. Now, to note that housing element update, it is trailing a little bit the process of the general plan update. So there will be more detailed conversations on that specifically, and there will also be a dedicated workshop with the community just to talk about the housing update, element update. Now, once again, for March 7th, we have another meeting that we need City Council to have a special meeting for in order to go through the process for the solving districting for elections. So there will be on March 7th, along with the general plan update joint session, we are proposing to have a public hearing to discuss the draft maps for the districts for the city of Solvang. The draft maps will be posted online at a dedicated website once again, which is districtsolvang.org on February 7th. So the community will have a month to review those maps and then provide feedback on March 7th to council and to the consultant. Then there will be another hearing scheduled for March 28th, which would be the second hearing for the maps. And then we would be, the plan is to have an ordinance for your review and adoption on April 11, 2022, with a deadline to submit the ordinance to the county by April 17th. Just a reminder of where the commission meetings are. The Planning Commission will be meeting on Monday, February 7 at 6 p.m. They will be reviewing Title 11 proposed changes again. I have been stating that the old lumber yard at St. George project would be coming for preliminary review on that date as well. Ed St. George and his team have requested that that would be moved to March so that they have sufficient time to prepare for that meeting. But with the scope of work presented to them at staff level, we'll be working with them. The Tourism Advisory Committee will be meeting on February 3rd at 3:30 p.m. We have another resignation, which is on the agenda today, who was the chair for the committee. So one of the items that they will need to address is their reorganization and appointing a chair to the committee. Design Review Committee will be next meeting on February 17th at 5 p.m. At the last meeting, they had a very robust discussion about the branding for Solvang. So branding includes the logo, the final review of that, the color scheme, application to signs throughout the city, such as entrance signs and wayfinding, and also the visitor center remodel. So the DRC made a lot of comments and provided a lot of feedback to the consultants, Cogs and Marvel, and they will be presenting a modified branding strategy at the next meeting. Copenhagen Enclosure. The plan currently is, the goal for staff is to work on a comprehensive report to be presented to City Council for preliminary conceptual review. At the last meeting, you chose to maintain the closure, but gave direction to come back with some estimates of costs. So we are working on a report to you to present to you just some general ideas at preliminary conceptual level of what permanent closure formats could be, could look like, what the estimated rough costs of those would be, what could be the process for envisioning or developing such a project, and what could be potential funding options. Currently, we are reopening or modifying the closure between the 1st Street and the 2nd Street based on your comments at the last council meeting. So we are working to reopen access to parking lot 2 in that half a block, so there's improvements to that circulation. The farmers market will continue to be on Copenhagen Drive because of the closure, so we'll be working with them as well, but they will not be moving back to 1st Street. Now on the advanced calendar on February 14th, it looks like as far as business items are concerned, we will have a fairly short agenda. We'll have a general plan update, alternative choices report, as I have mentioned earlier, as well as the Title 11 ordinance changes, which is going to the Planning Commission before then, and you will have some recommendations for changes to both clarify the Design Review Committee and PC relationship and responsibilities, update based on the language based on the current organizational structure of the city, as well as addressing the sheds and how the setbacks impact those. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions of the staff report? No. I had one and now I can't remember what it was. Senior moment, sorry. Next we have council comments. Is there any comments? Councilmember Thomas.
Just a notification, Rancheros Visit to Doors will be holding a ride this year, and will be coming to the council asking for permission, I think it's on May the 7th, to do the ride from the camp by Refugio and through the city like we normally do, and around into the Mission Green, where they do the blessing of the horses. So they'll come at the appropriate time for that, and hopefully we can accommodate that parade. Cal Cities wise, we're going to meet 3 times apparently this year, and GLEDA council member Roger Aceves and I will be representing Santa Barbara County. And what we will study is law enforcement, fire, life safety policies, emergency communications and services, and disaster preparedness. So I'll keep you posted on those as we go forward.
Great.
Thank you.
Roger and I went to high school together. Any other council comments?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I did get a comment from a local resident and business owner saying that there might be a demand and indeed a need for additional trash receptacles and maybe restrooms on the parking lot that is behind the Wine Valley Inn. So just something for consideration of the staff if there's something that we can work out over there.
Was it more waste receptacles or maybe more collection?
No, receptacles. There are occasions where if there is a lack of identifiable trash receptacles, visitors will tend to stash trash in whatever big containers that are owned by business owners that are for their private use, not for city use. So,
Along the alleyway then?
so seeing as, people walk back to their cars with, trash or things from, dining, snacks, whatever, I think it would be a good idea to check into it. Obviously, we would love, restrooms there too. That might take a little while longer, but, something to look at.
Just a suggestion, if it is for the businesses that have the dumpsters that are right along the alley, they may want to just get those, they're locked and only they can access them.
Well, it's not that they're opening it, but they're finding whatever crevices to stash the trash in there. So, yeah, it's not something that gets solved by just locking the trash.
Like, that was a concern at the Viking Hotel at one point, but got that straightened out, so. All right, thank you. There anyone else? I'll start up then. I just had a few. I did attend an SBCAG meeting last week. Congratulations are in order for Greg Hart, who is the 2nd District Supervisor. He was named Chair of the Los Angeles, San Diego, San Luis Obispo Rail Corridor Agency Board of Directors for this year. It's called LoSand. He serves as our SBCAG representative for that board. Going further for some Caltrans District 5 updates, the rock scaling operation is scheduled to take place beginning tomorrow and Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. This is the one that's right there at the Highway 101 junction, just south of the state route, Highway 1, so it's the Gaviota Tunnel. Those traveling northbound will encounter traffic control and intermittent highway closures not to exceed 15 minutes, so up to a possible 15-minute delay northbound traffic 101 tomorrow and Wednesday. And then another notice was Das Williams was elected chair of our SBCAG, and I was elected chair for the North County Sub-Regional. By being the chair, I've also inherited I'm on the Santa Barbara County Association of Government Executive Board. So that was another committee. I knew there was one other one, so that's what that one was about. This coming Friday, at 10:30, there's going to be a media opportunity. What's happening is Santa Barbara County Association of Governments and Clean Air Express is unveiling the all-electric commuter bus. So it's making its debut. It'll be out there at the median right in front of the Buellton Chamber of Commerce and the Buellton Visitors Bureau right there at the center median on the Avenue of the Flags. This will happen on Friday at 10:30. And a number of the board of directors from the SBCAG will be there, along with, I'm not sure if they are actually going to be here, but it says Congressman Carbajal and Senator Lamont will also be attending that as well. For those of you that are familiar with the San Ynez Valley Drug Coalition that is run through the People Helping People, I received an email from Maggie Johnson asking, she's the program director for that, and she was asking for community's involvement in a recall and recognition survey. It should only take a couple of minutes. It's to assess key components of the alcohol and drug prevention efforts in Santa Barbara County, and specifically for the San Ynez Valley as well. The priority areas assessed in the survey are for underage drinking, excessive drinking, marijuana use, opioid misuse. And there is a link that we are going to put on our City of Solvang website, so anyone that would be interested in participating as a parent or a grandparent or a friend, I believe even students are allowed to participate in it. There's going to be a link that will be posted to the website for the City of Solvang. We would appreciate your input on that. Getting out to another item for People Helping People, my understanding is that they are in receipt of some COVID test kits that they are giving away to the public, the in-home test kits that they're giving away. So that's another item that if anyone are in need of COVID test kits, those are available at the People Helping People right there at Alisal and Maple. Moving on to the food bank, the numbers the last couple of weeks. On January 11th, there were 172 households served. Individuals were 647, which is down a little bit, as well as January 18th. Last week, there was 167 households, 664 individuals. So it went up just a little bit, but at least we're not in the 1,200 and 1,300 people. So that's kind of nice to see that that's helping out. There was an update that went out on the 18th from the California State Water Board. They adopted on the 18th some emergency regulations that were approved and went into effect as of January 18th. And a couple of the items are wasteful practices, including a prohibition against runoff from landscape sprinklers and the washing of vehicles without an automatic shutoff nozzle on the hose. That's an interesting prohibition, but anyway, that's just something to look out for. As it stands, the water year that ended of September 30th was the second driest on record in California history. And at this time, all of the California's 58 counties are now under a drought emergency proclamation of some sort. Not all of them are, as severe, but every county is participating in that. Another program that I think sounds really nice. I received an email from the Santa Barbara County Education Office, and they're reaching out to the community for help in spreading the word about what the program is called Operation Recognition, and it's a program that provides eligible veterans with the opportunity to receive an honorary high school degree if their education was interrupted due to internment or military service during World War II, the Korean War, or the Vietnam War. So the deadline has been extended to January 31, which is just the end of this week, or beginning of next week. Families may apply on behalf of eligible individuals who are deceased. So if there's any families that are out in the community right now that have a father, an uncle, a brother, a sister, it doesn't matter. If they were not able to get their high school diploma, it's going to be retroactive, and they are going to be honored at a ceremony in April as a gesture of the Society's gratitude for their sacrifices that they made during wartime. There is sbceo.org/OR is the website that you can go to for that as well, and I think maybe if we can post that in addition to us, I'll get that to you. So it'd be really great to be able to honor those veterans. I understand that on the 27th of this week at 10:30, Peasants Deli and Market is going to be opening, so there's going to be a second grand opening their second business here, which is really great to see. So congratulations to Chef Michael and Sarah for their second business location in the city limits of Solvang. A reminder that coming up will be a time capsule ceremony on February 15th that will celebrate 100 years of the Solvang Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber is going to bury a time capsule in the area between Mortenson's Bakery and Peasants Feast, where the Dania Hall used to be as their longtime meeting space. And they are asking for members and the community to provide a small token to contribute to the time capsule. You can get a hold of Tracy at the Chamber, solvangchamber.com, if you're interested in participating in that. This week is also Restaurant Week, so there's specialties going on at some of your favorite restaurants, not just in Solvang, but throughout the San Ynez Valley. 3 courses for $30, $40, or $50. You can go to the website dinesyv.com for the menus and participants. Coming up on the 29th at the Elverhoy Museum, their new exhibits will be Fables, Foibles, and Fairy Tales. Oof. That was a tongue twister. Let's try that again. Fables, Foibles, and Fairy Tales. So that's going to be opening on January 29th at the Elverhoy Museum. City manager already covered the financial plan workshop for this Thursday. Again, it will be right here. It's at 6 o'clock. And Zoom instructions are available if you want to participate. And lastly, I just wanted to remind some of the businesses, especially right now, that a lot of businesses are really hurting for employees. The high school is planning a career fair on Thursday, February 10th from 9:15 to 12:15 at the high school. It's the 3rd annual college and career fair. And they're asking for community business representatives to attend and possibly host a booth and give the students an idea of what employees are looking for, or employers are looking for in their employees. And it's a really good opportunity to be able to connect with some of the youth that are out there that are of the age now where they can work. And some of them are very interested in working but don't really have an idea what your business offers. It's a really good opportunity to be able to give to the community this way and actually benefit your own business to help out. So just something that's out there for that. And those are my comments.
Charlie?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I
Yes.
have one comment.
Yes.
My only comment is, I'm sure a lot of you in the residents of Solvang and the council knows this, but we lost a really good man this last week. Glenn Jacobson passed away. Esther Jacobson's brother. Glenn was very involved with the Vikings, Danish Brotherhood, Danish Days, just one of the good guys. And if you could just keep the Jacobson family and Glenn in your prayers, I would appreciate it. And I just think it's important that we know that as a town, we loved him and we'll miss him very much.
Yeah. Big loss for the community. Moving on to item number 4, should be the consent agenda. Madam City Clerk, would you please read the items?
The consent agenda is designed for routine administrative city matters and is approved by roll call vote with one motion. These items are discussed only on request of council members. Members of the public were afforded an opportunity to speak on consent agenda items during public communications portion of this agenda. 4A, approval of agenda as presented. 4B, approve the minutes of the City Council meeting of January 10, 2022. C, approve an agreement with Sunbeam Solar Technologies, DBA Sunbeam Consulting, for engineering design services for the sewer system upgrade project PW 176 in the amount of $95,900 for the term January 24 through 2020 through December 31st, 2022, January 24th, 2022 through December 31st, 2022, and authorize the mayor to execute on behalf of the city and city manager to execute contract amendments within the contingency amount of $4,000 on behalf of the city. Item D, approve the second amendment to the agreement with West Coast Arborists, Inc. for street tree pruning for the additional amount of $60,000 for the remaining term, July 1, 2022, June 30th, 2022, and authorize the city manager to execute on behalf of the city.
All right, are there any council members that have any items that they would like to pull?
No.
I just had a quick clarification, or question on item 4D on the contract, confirming that the one that was listed in there, which was for 2024, that one is gonna be null and void, and it's only gonna be going through this year, June 30th, 2022.
That's correct, yes.
And then I just wanted to ask, on pages 62 and 64 of that same item, they had a tree list of approximately 400 trees. Is that the latest and the most accurate tree list? Because unless I'm mistaken, there's no trees listed in the 16 or 1700 block of Mission Drive that belong to the city. There are only listed trees in the 1500 block.
I would have to get back to you on that, but we'll make sure that with whatever contract is executed through the end of June, we'll have the most up-to-date list.
Okay, just wanted to double check that. I was looking at the list, just seeing what, they actually were clarifying where all the trees are at the addresses.
Good job.
So, anyway. I didn't mean to pull it, if we could get that clarification on there. So, let's see, need to move out to, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Mayor, if I may ask if we could, because of consultant and staff availability here, if we could move item 9 to become item 6 instead?
Certainly, I think that would be fine. See if I can find what item 9 is on this list.
Item 9
Oh,
is the sewer
master
master
plan.
plan update.
Okay. Up to 6. Okay. So with that correction on the current agenda, do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante?
Yes.
Councilmember Arona?
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas?
Yes.
Mayor Gehrig?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Great. Moving on to regular business. No public hearings today, so we'll move to item number 5 on the regular agenda. And I guess I can recuse myself right now for this.
Okay, so we first off need the staff report on this, please.
Madam Clerk, please read the title.
Law Enforcement Contract with Santa Barbara County Sheriff. Receive a report and proposed by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office fiscal year 22-23 rates and authorize the city manager to submit a written notice of dispute resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this item is in front of you today because the city is in progress of discussions with the Sheriff's Department per our current contract for the rates that will be charged to the city or to all the contract cities for the next fiscal year, will be applied for the next fiscal year. This is the last year in a 5-year contract that was first negotiated and entered into in 1920. While in the first 3 years, the County of Santa Barbara and the Sheriff's Department held the rate increases at a reasonable level. About a year ago, we were here in front of you discussing the fact that the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office had submitted an unreasonable rate increases, which ranged from over 20% to over 30% for all of the contract cities. We went through a disputed negotiation process last year, reached an agreement for the rates that the city is currently paying today for 21-22 fiscal year. And right now we are in the process to where the Sheriff's Department has submitted to the cities per our contract agreement their final proposal for the rates for next year. Unfortunately, the rates do show another 15%. Last year we had settled on an increase of 19%, which was still extremely high. This is another 15% on top of that. The cities have been meeting collectively. The cities are the city of Solvang, Buellton, Goleta, and Carpinteria, are the 4 contract cities in the County of Santa Barbara. We feel that this is an unreasonable increase, and we also have contracted with a financial expert to work with us to really dive into the model of the cost allocation. With that, the recommendation is for you to receive the report and more details on the cost allocation. There's some logical issues with that, and there's a disproportionate increase to the cities versus to the county in the costs over the last 2 years especially. So Ras will go through that in detail with you. He has a presentation that he's been working on and can walk you through the history of the contract. And then the action that we ask you to make today, which would be to authorize submission of a written notice of dispute to the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office. Other cities are proposing the same to their city councils. The city of Carpinteria, in fact, is hearing the same item today, and then the city of Goleta and the city of Buellton, my understanding is, will be considering the same action. With that, I'd like to introduce Russ Bronson online to walk us through the details of the cost allocation.
Great, thanks, Enia. Mayor, Council, I'm happy to be here tonight, and let me just share my screen with the presentation that I have. So I've been working with the 4 cities, including Solvang, last spring and this year, as Enia mentioned, on the two contracts, the one for this year and the one for last year. The work most recently, once the city got it, I did a very thorough review of the cost model for FY23 for the next fiscal year. I then engaged with the county, Christy Valeska at the county, who's doing a lot of their technical stuff, along with the county consultant, Allison Dale, to make sure that the way the model was working was reflective of the data that was going in. And lastly, to really review the data going in. And I got pretty good comfort with the model. I have less comfort with the data that's going into it still. There's some questions, but I'll talk to you about, as we go through 3 findings, which I won't take a lot of time with now, but I'll go through each of these findings in a little more detail, a little background of why these are issues that we had as we went through the county analysis on the contract. One is this, when we determined a disconnect between the cost and the hours, and this is partly a function of the way the model is structured and how the model has both a kind of the current component is, let's say for fiscal year 23, it's based on the actuals from fiscal year 21, the fiscal year that just ended last June. But then there's a comparison to what you actually pay in 21 versus where we are now, this true-up component. And then the data is always, it's always lagging what you're actually paying, so they have to, mix and match that. But the one thing I looked at was just saying, and I'll show another chart of this in the next slide, but to say, well, how does the cost increases? So that as costs have changed for the cities and the county over the last 5 years. And I'm just talking actual cost of patrol as calculated by the county. Where's that cost change gone to? And it's primarily gone to the cities. 70% of the change in contract costs have been paid for by the 4 cities, and about a little over 20% by the county. At the same time, the average hours for the cities, are about 27%, where 73% for the county. And why this is significant, the county's pointed out, well, wait, the contract share themselves has increased, let's say 27% to 30% for the cities during that time frame. That's really close. And the problem is that the cities, a small change for the cities has an outsized impact over what it does for the county. So we'll talk about that a little more. But there's that disconnect. And why that disconnect is there in large part is because the cities have static hours. And so this would be a theme in this presentation tonight. The cities have purchased a static amount of hours, a little over 60,000. Where the county's hours spiked up in fiscal year 20 have been steadily declining over the years. And why that's important is what you pay for cost is a function of the county's model, which calculates the cost per deputy service unit times the number of hours per hour times the number of hours you purchase. So as the county hours go down, the cost per service hour goes up, which has the effect of shifting more cost to the cities over the county for different years. Now to show, again, this is this cost disconnect. I think this should be as part of number 1. This cost disconnect. I also looked at, well, what are the cities paying in what's being proposed in fiscal year 23 versus what you paid in fiscal year 29 as a total group. Both numbers include escalation and true-up costs, but don't include menu items. And the cities are paying combined $4.1 million more in 23 proposed than they were in fiscal year 19. While the county's costs, just based on their calculations, is $1.3 million more in fiscal year 23 over what it was in 2019. So that's that disconnect between you're not getting any more service, and yet you're paying a much higher percent share of the costs for the contracts. And this is number 2, is the cities are charged more than the actual cost change. So kind of that disconnection theme. And the top right graph shows the actual cost of patrol cost that was allocated in the contracts for 2019 through the proposed FY23. And what you can see there's a fairly flat, sometimes even going down in 21. And the average is in this gray line up top. So there hasn't been much change. There hasn't been much change in the actual cost. And yet again, as we say here, this is how costs have gone up and down, and who's spread those costs. We talked about earlier in FY20, the cities actually went down, county went up. The next year, FY21, the city went down a little, county went down a lot. And in the last 2 years, the cities have gone up a lot in terms of the cost, that cost increase, where the county went up a little last year, but is going down in FY23. And that's where you get that difference, $1 million average change for the cities, $300,000 average change for the county. So it's 3 times that amount. So again, that disconnect is due in large part to the county's change in patrol hours from year to year, which then has this outsized impact on the cities of your cost per hour goes up, but your hours stay the same while the county's hours go down. That's why they get charged less. Number 3 is model complexity. So there's a lot on here because the model is really complex. I'm not going to go through all this, except to say I could confirm that the model mathematically works, right? So how the county's designed it, how it's run, it's not easy to understand. I spent dozens of hours literally going through and going over this model. But I did meet with the county and they answered all my questions, and the model works. My concern is this complexity is what is the information coming into the model. So specifically, what drives the model is the pay detail. So that's one of the things, all the 10,000 lines or whatever of how individuals code their time. And that's from deputies to command staff to support staff to law enforcement support. All of them code their time against patrol, which adds up to both the total cost of patrol, and then on the deputy side, what their hours are, feeds into the total, the total hours of direct hours of patrol service, which leads to that that cost per hour. So the pay detail is really key to this model, and there's two issues. One is the county's recognizing the contract. This is a key impact. So we're going to do regular updated training, and we're going to do regular audits, and there just isn't any evidence of that happening specifically for this contract, right? They talked about, well, we did some training this last October because we have a new system. It's like, well, okay, but it wasn't training for this contract. And that's a big question, I have. The other piece is that the city, that what comes into the timesheets, which is the hours of direct deputy, how much they've worked on patrol, that's what drives the cost per hour, because that's the denominator in this equation. However, if when I ask, well, do they track their per hour, the hours here for the time they spend for each of the cities that they're working for? And the answer is no, that's done through the dispatch system. So there's a disconnect between what service you're getting and how they're tracking that service or not tracking that service, because they're going to have two different systems where they're tracking hours that don't necessarily talk to each other. So that just becomes a question. And then the third is there's still some outstanding questions on the pay detail that we would like to have answered, some things that I won't go into tonight, but they've answered some issues. They agree there was a coding mistake I found that was in their favor. They found then some coding mistakes that were in the city's favor, brought it back down. So there's a lot of things that can happen that can really shift who's paying what within this model. So those are kind of the three main issues that we've discussed with the county. So we think that those are reasons to moderate the contract cost change, right? They did it for this year's contract, and we think there's reason to do it again for the FY23 contract, right? The county hours of service changing. There's designated hours for city services, but not for county services. And as the patrol hours go down, your costs go up. And it doesn't have a big impact on the county, but it does have an oversized impact on the cities, just by virtue of the size of your budgets and impact this has. And attendant to that's this lack of formal training. So we think there are enough questions, there's enough, not necessarily we found errors, but there's just questions about how you haven't done what you said you're going to do. Maybe we shouldn't trust this data as much as to the amount of money we're having to pay for contracts. One of the things the county pointed out, so the slides I just showed you was the discussion. Those are slides we used in discussion with the county. They've come back, and I wanted to address some of their one of their slides directly. So the slide you see, the chart here is produced by Nadelson Dale, and it shows that, hey, if you go back to fiscal year 18-19 and you take that 199.86 and you escalate that by 3% a year, you get to 224.94 on the far right, and they're actually charging us 224.14. So this is it's been up and down, or it's down and it's been up the last 2 years, but this is a kind of this it's kind of a regulated 3%. If we had a contract that said 3%, this is what you'd be paying. What's the problem? And I'll say that my issue with that is that they've also in FY22 they made some changes in how they what the model showed. One, there was a big drop in county hours. So direct hours went down significantly in FY22, which increased the cost per hour. And prior in fiscal year 19, 20, and 21, any escalation they added to their cost and any true-ups were actually included in these models. So the 19, 20, and 21 models had true-ups and had escalation in the model. When you get to 22, the escalation was both doubled, which might be appropriate, but it was doubled, and it was pulled outside of that DSU per hour calculation. And then true-ups were also outside the DSU calculation. So when you add those on, you're actually, there's not a straight line here from 3% per year for the total amount you're paying. If you include true-ups, it's a 7.3% increase for Solvang. If you include, the escalation, which I think the escalation is escalation of trips partly as well, but escalation separately, that's 3.9% a year increase. And as Zini mentioned, that there's a huge increase in FY22 and another big increase proposed in FY23. That it's just hard to it may be the way the model was built. It may be the county did some things that was bad for them and now it's bad for you, and maybe it all equals out. I think that's been their answer, but we've still had some difficulty with both pay detail and other things to say. What they talk about here isn't the full, it's not the full picture. And when we look at the full picture, it just, this is where this hits these extras. If your total cost was $224 an hour, I actually don't think we'd be having this discussion right now. But if when your cost is closer to $270 an hour, when you used to be you're $194 in 2021, that is the genesis for these discussions and the questions that we've been talking with the county over the last year. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the staff? Of the report from the council?
No.
We have no questions up here. Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to ask questions? No? Do we have anybody on Zoom that has a question? Anybody raise their hand? I don't see anybody from here. Okay. With no public comment, then we'll close the public comment, bring the item back to the council for discussion and action. Anyone have any last comments with regard to this?
Mediation.
Okay. If there are no other comments, then we need to have a motion receiving this report. I believe we need a motion.
Receive a report and authorize the city manager to submit a written notice of dispute.
Thank you. Do we have that motion, please?
I'll make a motion that authorizes the city manager to submit a written notice of dispute resolution for the law enforcement contract with Santa Barbara County Sheriff.
I'll second it.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante,
Yes?
Councilmember Rona,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Mayor Yurick abstains. Motion passes 4-0.
Mayor Yurick recused himself. Motion passes 4.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you.
All right. I believe that concludes it. We can bring back our mayor who knows what he's doing instead of me.
Great job, Mayor.
No, that's not it.
Pass that test.
Here's your backpack too.
Oh, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 6, which is now the sewer water master plan. Would you please read the item into the agenda, Madam Clerk?
Approve the sewer master plan update.
Thank you. So this item is in front of you because the city of Solomon has gone through a comprehensive study of the sewer system, and the master plan has been updated for the first time since 1988. So the recommendations for today are first to approve the sewer master plan as is presented to you, and then to direct staff to incorporate the recommended projects into the city's 10-year capital improvement program and costs into the ongoing sewer rate study. So this report is incorporated into the sewer study that we are drafting right now, and we'll continue to work with staff as we progress on all of the updates, including the general plan update, and which will lead to another update in the capital improvement program. Once again, would like to introduce Jose Acosta, who is our first utilities director for the city of Solomon. So welcome, Jose. The sewer is one of the primary responsibilities of Jose, along with water. and he will present the report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. This evening we'll be presenting the sewer master plan update of 2021 that was prepared by Water Systems Consultants. And we have Mr. Josh Reynolds, who's representing WSC. He was the primary engineer who compiled the report with input from staff and working with Nate, who's in the audience as well, in case we have any technical questions or need some information regarding the plan. Again, we'll go ahead and start with the slideshow. We have the presentation of the 2021 sewer plan. Some background on the sewer plan. Most of the city's sewer collections and infrastructure was constructed between the years of 1950s and the 1970s by the then Solvang Municipal Improvement District. The city of Solvang incorporated in 1985, and the first and only SMP was prepared shortly thereafter in 1988. The city contracted with Water Systems Consultants to complete an assessment of the wastewater collection system, including the lift stations, pipelines, and force mains, to compile the SMP being presented this evening. So some of the objectives of the SMP, while it was compiled, was to plan for expected growth and future development of a representative hydraulic model of the sewer system, identify existing and future deficiencies within the collection systems and pump stations, assess and evaluate sewer collection system conditions, compile an asset renewal plan to incorporate into the 10-year capital improvement plan, and develop a prioritized list of improvement projects inclusive of the projected costs. Some facts regarding the sewer collection system. There are approximately 2,059 connections within the system, approximately 31 miles of gravity sewer mains, and 0.56 miles of force main sewers. 645 manholes, 85 cleanouts, and 2 lift stations within the collection system. One of the components of the SMP was to enhance and update our hydraulic modeling, and the model was based on GIS data that was provided by the city, utilizing our current GIS mapping and system that we have with the city. They also utilized spatially located meters that were set throughout the collection system by WSC to monitor flows throughout the system and get accurate readings of flows as they're being delivered to the wastewater treatment plant. Also, utilizing historic customer water usage data. We usually use the winter months of consumers' water use because that's when it's a true representative of what goes to the wastewater treatment plant, whereas during the summer and spring months, a lot of that water gets used for agricultural or for landscaping needs. So that's why the winter months are used for that information. And existing facility pumping capacities. They review the capacities of the current pump stations, lift stations, and use that to get the flow going to the wastewater treatment plant to compile a hydraulic model. Here we're going to be discussing the model flow estimates. The system was analyzed system-wide for annual average flows and peak hour wet weather flows. The peak hour wet weather flows are usually during a heavy storm, and during the study they did have one big storm, which was last January, which was the only storm and the only water that we received within the city. And so it was a good rainstorm to utilize. Based on the peak hour of wet weather flow, they used a peaking factor of 4 based on the measured wastewater flow. And they analyzed for existing, build out, and building plus infill. So they analyzed for existing structures and flows. The build out is based off of lots within the city that have the capability of building out or building on those lots. Build out plus infill took up approximately 30% of the slots that are capable of adding an ADU and utilizing that percentage. As you can see, the annual average flow right now is about 502,000 gallons per day. With build out, we're looking at about 540, and build out plus infill, we're looking at close to 600,000 gallons per day going to the wastewater treatment plant. Based on the peak hour wet weather flows, you're looking at 2 million, 2.1, and about 2.4 million gallons going to the wastewater treatment plants. They also compiled the assumed useful life of the collection system assets, and the information that they used there was the number of years expected to be functional and in service. It was based on industry standards and other areas out throughout the state and other agencies. Their experience with similar projects, their best professional judgment, and the pump stations based on the grading system represent percentage of useful life remaining. So within the SMP, they graded the functions of the pump stations to grade them, explaining the useful life that's remaining in those systems. The sewer system, they completed a sewer collection system evaluation as well. Approximately 20 segments of pipe exceeded capacity criteria. 13 of those pipe segments are along the pump station routes when modeled to operate during peak hour wet weather flows. To the left, you'll see the chart showing the lift station capacities. They were evaluated, and currently they are sufficient to meet existing flow, build-out plus infill at annual average, and also peak hour wet weather flows. So all 3 pump stations are currently operating and should meet capacity for now and in the future. The pump stations do have some work that need to be done, which is on the recommended improvements, which we'll discuss coming up here in the next couple slides. One other area that they presented and made recommendations on was pipeline replacement strategies. They gave 2 options of approach to pipeline replacement throughout the collection system. They did a linear, which is consistent and equal approach for the timeline. So you would just take approximately 4.4 miles per year at approximately 460K per year if you budget it, and that would just be every year you'd replace the same amount and budget the same amount, which would increase based on inflation. Or you could take the phase approach, which varies based on the year and the budgeted amounts. Here they show a semi-aggressive approach for years 2021 through 2041 at approximately 0.35 miles per year, approximately $400,000 per year. During the years 2041 and 2061, they take an aggressive approach of approximately 0.95 miles per year with a budget amount of approximately $1.1 million. Between the years of 2061 and 2100, they flatten out a bit and take a less aggressive approach by replacing 0.14 miles per year, approximately $162,000 per year. These figures and these strategies would change if we had any unforeseen incidents where we had some mainline issues that catastrophic incidents, or if the city wanted to be more aggressive. This can always be reviewed and adjusted as well. Again, these dollars are all based on 2021 dollars and would change based on inflation. They did make recommended improvements for the collection system that prioritize based on the remaining useful life, ability to provide adequate capacity, and timing and impact of future developments. The cost options prepared using a combination of data from RS Means cost software, which is just a software that takes into consideration all aspects of reconstruction of the system, cost of completing the construction, cost of materials as well, and recent bids of similar projects. The projects were ranked within 3 categories as follows. They had Project A category, which has a project time frame of about 1 to 5 years, and there's 6 projects within this project category. The existing deficiencies list what currently needs to be replaced, repaired, and the cost for those repairs during each category. The infrastructure renewal strategies, that is set in there as making the replacement of the collection system lines, which was presented in the previous slide where we showed replacement throughout the system. The total project cost are their recommendations and cost recommendations based off of all the projects done within those categories. As you can see, Project A is 1 to 5 years, Project B is 6 to 10 years. There's approximately 3 projects in that category. And project category C is within 11 to 20 years. There's 5 projects within that category. The total amount was approximately 10.5 million to complete all these projects that they discussed and recommended within the sewer master plan. So with that being said, I'm willing to take any questions, and again, we have Mr. Josh Reynolds available as well if we have any questions for WSC.
Thank you for that report. Do we have any questions of the council at this time?
Yes, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante, please go ahead.
There was a couple things, you went through it fairly quick. First off, this is an extremely comprehensive report. Half of it was over my head, honestly. Excellent report, very well done. It started a while back under Matt Vanderlyn, and I think he deserves a little bit of credit for getting this thing going. The one thing that I haven't heard yet out of this study was I see in that last slide you had 5 years, and then 10 years in the three different A, B, and C projects. One of the things that occurred to me is it's been so long since we've done this study. Shouldn't this study have also recommended that we do this study again every 5 years?
So this study, as you can see, the last one was completed in 1988. The sewer master plans, water master plans should be reviewed and updated periodically. So you probably should review these every couple years, which we would do as staff, and update as the system's being upgraded or any changes that occur throughout the system. If we have future build out that exceeds the recommendations within this report. So this is something that's a living document and would be continually be updated and reviewed as well.
Thank you, that's kind of what I wanted to hear.
Yes, sir.
We're not gonna just let it sit on the shelf again.
No, sir. And unfortunately, it's sat that long, but that's not what their master plans are there for. They're there to be reviewed and continually updated.
Excellent. You mentioned growth, but on your charts, on every place I saw growth, it was 0. I didn't see anything that suggested that we have this RENA guidelines where we're supposed to have more housing. We've got projects on the books that are coming in to produce more housing, including a hospital. I mean, these are all going to take a lot of water and wastewater, and I didn't see those as considerations if I caught everything properly.
I think, as Zena had mentioned earlier, once we finalize a general plan, we'll have to reevaluate that and incorporate those figures and that information into this plan as well.
Any concerns with regard to volumes, particularly since we've also got a little piece of property that we want to add on to the city down in Alisal Ranch? I mean, there's some growth areas there that I concern me. Just put it that way. I want to know if they're being considered and thought about, because what I think I got out of this was we have some inadequate facilities in some places, adequate in others. And then if we're going to add on to the demand, are we going to continue to exceed, or have we got that in the plan? Is that making sense?
No, it makes absolute sense, and it's always a concern when new construction comes into town and when the contractors don't take into account water and sewer. It's a frustrating area, especially being in utilities for so long. But I think this plan does take into consideration and does show that we are adequately able to take on future growth and build out with infill. So they did document those figures in there. We'll just have to continue monitoring how quickly the growth comes, and again, readjust the plan and modify it accordingly. So we will keep an eye on that. We will continually maintain dialogue between the construction within the city and the utilities.
One last question, if I may. I just do one of your job. Anyway, I apologize. It's going.
No worries at all.
Never mind. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
That was a really good presentation, Jose.
Thank you. And I think, as mentioned, Matt Vanderlinden did start this project. He does deserve some credit, as well as other staff within the wastewater sector. And thank you to Josh Reynolds and WSC for their work as well. Yes, sir.
I finally remembered my question. Is any part of this study talked about rate increases to cover the costs that we're seeing in the future? Or is that all part of the separate rate study that we're doing?
That's part of the rate study. So actually, this report states that this master plan and the long-range program will be incorporated into the rate study. And just a reminder, the rate study, we're looking at a 10-year segment. You could, at a maximum by Prop 218, set rate increases for a 5-year segment when we come to that point.
Thank you very much.
I had a few. Thank you, Jose, for the report. Nathan, thank you for all the work you did on it as well. I know you had a lot to do with that. On some of the pages, like I had different population amounts that were listed. And one of them that was a concern was the one on page 323. Actual report said that we had 10,230 as our population. So I don't know if that was just a typo, because it's not even close to the, either, there's a couple of other ones that were, one mentioned the 2,059 that you had, that's page 298. And then on 304 and 320, they talked about 2,033. And then on page 323, it says the population is 10,230. And I just want to make sure we're looking at the right section here. It's under the, let's see, I wrote down the right.
Mayor, was it page 323 that you are seeing 10,000?
Yes, underneath the introduction. City of Salt Lake currently provides wastewater collection and treatment services to an estimated 10,230 customers within the city limits. I know it's a typo, but I just wanted to make sure we're consistent with.
Does that include hotels and?
That's kind of what I wanted to ask.
But didn't we also take care of Los Olivos for a while?
And the casino, don't we also process their?
Yeah, we don't have a casino.
So
No.
that's where the other question would be is, I know that they were talking about, there was some figures in here representing approximately 20% for the San Ynez Community Services District. Knowing that the county and Solvang, all of us are going to have to provide more housing, and I'm positive there's gonna be more housing out in San Ynez, wouldn't that require possibly more than just a 20% projection going forward? Maybe more? Just a thought out there, I don't know.
Well, what I could speak on the 20% is it's based off of what the city or the San Ynez Community Service District is invested with our wastewater treatment plant.
Which
That's
right
why we
now.
take the 20%, yes.
Okay.
Until that contract's renegotiated, if it ever is, it remains at 20%. And they don't exceed that capacity, and they're not close to that capacity at this time.
Okay.
But I'd like to ask Mr. Josh Reynolds if he has any information on the population figure of 10,230. Is that inclusive of the San Ynez CSD?
It was in section 2 underneath the introduction.
I see it. Good evening. Josh Reynolds at Water Systems Consulting. And really, I think you hit the nail on the head there. When we're using customers, we're typically talking about connection to the system. And so if we're saying 10,230 customers, that's a typo. The customer number is 2,059 or whatever the actual count is that Jose gave in the presentation. So that's a typo error that we can correct so that it can be corrected in the final report. I think the actual population number is shown on the next page, 6,126. That seems about right. I think one thing to keep in mind when we're doing these master plans is they're based on your current general plan. So we're not looking at annexation areas unless we're doing a specific special study for that. I don't think we did that for you. We just looked within existing city boundaries. And we looked at every empty parcel within the city and took the city's best guess at what might happen there based on its zoning or if there's an expectation that zoning would change. When we put a sewer load and accounted for a sewer load at that location.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Because I was noticing the number that once we go to our final build out, projected in 2041, I think it was going to be approximately 6,400 or 6,300 if I'm not mistaken, for the city of something.
Yeah, and I think another thing if I may, to kind of keep in mind is we base our sewer flow projections on the land use. We're not really using population. I'm reporting population here as best we understand it based on your land use.
Right.
Or the counts within the city limits now. But we're projecting the sewage flow based on the underlying zoning and the land use plans for the city limits. So population is a report out here that we want to get right and we want to say the right thing, but I don't actually use the population as I'm calculating flow projections or other aspects of the sewer master plan. It might show up in some places as a denominator to say this much sewage per population or something along those lines, but we're not using that count to project sewage flows. We're using the land use and water use records and sewer flow metering to project land use, to project sewage flows over time.
Okay, and then segueing then into land use, knowing that, I think you wrote somewhere in the last land use element that we had was adopted in 2008. So knowing that we're doing a general plan, we are going to be, with this sewer master plan, adopting whatever we have for our general plan in the next year?
Maturity,
comes into
yes.
it.
So I think this master plan has definitely, it's a lot of work done since 1988. We have the hydraulic models built now. As we go through the general plan update and our decisions made on land use and that plan gets adopted, then it's a much easier refresh of this new plan with all the most modern technology that's available to us today to estimate any changes that might need to be done in the future.
So then, getting back to on page 324, under the 2.3.4 under population, it said that, oh wait a minute, did I write that down wrong? Service area, it's a service area. Yeah, 6,300. For final build out, yeah. And then we are still only for the, oh, there it is, the service area. That it said that the scope of this master plan focuses exclusively on the city's collection system and doesn't evaluate the loading for the St. Ines Community Services District. And that's only just because we're always gonna be doing the 20%. Is that kind of the way that works? I'm just trying to make sure I wrap my head around that part of it. For the final loading at final build out and infill.
Yes, that makes sense.
Did I ask the right
Yes.
question as well?
Yes, it does. And we only cover the San SCSD based off of our pump stations, which deliver the sewage to the wastewater treatment plant. So they don't utilize our collection system for their sewage. The only line that they utilize is that force main that comes into the pump station.
And the one that's come along the river?
Yes, sir.
From that part there?
So that's the only reason where they're included is at that point, because the rest of the collection system is utilized by the city of Solvang exclusively.
So then, knowing that part, the next section would be the pipe maintenance. Is that considered part of our pipe maintenance? That section from the community services district to that lift station, will that be on them? All of ours is strictly what we have, and I'm seeing Nathan nod, so that's a good thing. I just wanted to make sure the pipe replacement is really only part of us in the city.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Knowing that the section running along here, or the alley, I guess from Sora down to Elroy, that one section that the piping is, the capacity is insufficient.
Yes.
What is the best pipe diameter to be putting in there? And I know it gave it as an alternate, was to be able to take the pipe from Soro and not use the easements along here and bring it onto 2nd Street and go down?
So I believe that the Sunbeam report that was on the consent agenda said that they wanted to upgrade to 10-inch, I believe, is what they want to put in there.
Okay. And then does it significantly change the diameter inside for usage when you go and utilize the is is it the CIPP, the coating inside when you do that, as opposed, because I know the modeling utilized, I think 50% of that as the figure for replacement of piping, and then the other one was the open trench, and then the other one was, is it CIPP?
There's open trench, pipe bursting, and the CIPP, I believe.
CIPP, that's.
Coat in place.
Does that,
Coat in
when they
place.
do that in place, does that reduce significantly the diameter that's needed for inside? Or
The coating is a layer of product that's just put along the piping. It's usually not a significant decrease in the diameter of the pipe, the inner diameter of the pipe.
All right, because I know they did that entire deal using that at in Catalina Island for all of their sewer and systems going down.
It's a great technology that they came out with a while back, and it allows for, because open trenching is obviously a higher cost.
Right.
And so this allows for.
A significant higher cost compared
Yes.
to the CIPP.
Yes.
And I guess just on the other one is the recommendations. I just wanted to, congratulations, thank you guys for all of the maintenance that you guys do and that you have been doing over the years, because it is really helping the city be able to keep our costs down. I know it seems like it's a lot, and it really is, but it could be even worse if there wasn't some good maintenance on it. So just kudos to you guys, staff, and all of that out there. I think that's all I had as far as my questions. Trying to get educated on it. It was.
It was a big document to read. Took several days and several naps, but got through it.
Yeah, if there's no other questions from the staff, I'll just take it out for public comment. No public comment and no one out on Zoom or telephone, so just bring it back for final motion to accept the update.
Do we need a motion for accepting this report?
The recommendation is to approve the sewer master plan update 2021 and direct staff to incorporate the recommended projects into the city's 10-year capital improvement program and costs into the ongoing sewer rate study.
I'll move that we accept the plan and we put it into the capital improvement plan. The 10-year capital improvement plan?
Correct, yes.
I'll second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante?
Yes.
Councilmember Arona?
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas?
Yes.
Mayor Yurick?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right.
I'd like to thank Josh for coming on this evening. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you in the future. And thanks to the field crew for being here as well.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the time.
Bye.
All right, moving on to item number 7 now. Madam Clerk, would you please read that in the record?
Next item is what used to be number 6, which is now.
Which is number
Number
7
seven.
now. Item number 7, fiscal report.
Fiscal year 2021-22 mid-year quarter 2 financial report. Received the fiscal year 21-22 mid-year report and approved budget adjustments as presented in attachment A.
Thank you. So I have a brief report just to kind of go over the overview of the city's financial review on an ongoing basis. So each 2 years, the city develops a 2-year financial plan, which sets priorities and funds programs and projects. The annual budget is appropriated for each fiscal year on annual basis. An annual comprehensive financial report is presented every year following an independent audit, so that's what you received in January, which sums up the financials for last fiscal year, and also updates the available fund balances. Then staff prepares quarterly financial updates, which are presented to the City Council. Budget adjustments are processed per council actions if additional funds are authorized. So those are just items throughout the agendas that come up to you to where we ask for budget adjustment and additional allocations. And then at mid-year, we take a look at where we are in our allocated budget compared to actuals through the midpoint, through the end of December. So staff has reviewed the financials in great detail with budget to actuals. And at that point, we make an evaluation, make recommendations to the city council whether any budget adjustments are necessary. The budget is controlled at fund level, and so the goal is to balance the budget throughout the year, to stay within allocations, including the available revenues as budgeted and expenditures, to where we don't overspend over the impact that's projected for that year as the net impact to the fund. So this is that net change in financial position summary that you adopted for the current fiscal year. When it shows a negative, it means that overall the budget plan does draw on resources this year. And that's okay and natural because the capital improvement program expenditures, for example, are usually one-time expenditures that you sometimes collect dollars or funds through different mechanisms. So in this case, because of especially with the wastewater treatment plant upgrades and some water projects, we did see that the net change in financial position was $4.5 million in the negative for the year, and for general plant was $666,000. This is a summary of the budget adjustments that have been processed by staff based on your authorization and the actions you took for the first 6 months in order to approve certain contracts and other priorities that you had. So there was the largest expenditures that you adopted above and beyond the general plant update was the IDK contract extension through June of 2022 at $300,000. And then the additional contract amount for the River Wells petition for the EIR addendum that you just received at the last council meeting. Overall, we are very much on target for the first 6 months. There is no significant over expenditures. There's also no concerns with our revenue projections. The revenues are coming in strong and stronger than originally was planned, but we want to be conservative when it comes to revenue because there's still a lot of uncertainties. The one budget adjustment that's recommended here for revenue is the third one below, which is the funding from the American Rescue Plan. That's the grant that's allocated to all the cities, which is non-competitive. Overall, when we budgeted, we were expecting to receive about $1.1 million, but we will actually be receiving closer to $1.4 million. So the final allocations were better than we expected, but the timing is different. So the timing, the second payment, unfortunately, won't be received this year, which from a budgeting perspective just creates an accounting issue to where we just want to make sure that we are not overestimating the revenue that will be received within this fiscal year. So that's the adjustment down by $400,000. And then the other two small adjustments are for legal fees, some for the water. That work, we're asking for another $20,000 because there has been a lot more activity for the River Wells project and administrative hearing proceedings. So that's an additional estimate, and then there's just a small additional estimate for the general fund of $10,000 more. So these are budget adjustments that are recommended for you to approve tonight, and that concludes my presentation unless you have any questions.
Are there any questions of the staff report? Do you know when we're going to be getting those payments from the American Rescue?
So we received one payment of about $660,000 already, and then we expected to receive the next payment in July. So it crosses just by 1 month.
Okay.
Also, we were on a meeting together with a grant writer, potentially. Are we applying for additional grants for water, wastewater, those kind of areas?
So we are actively looking at grant opportunities. Yes, there's a lot of grant activity right now from both the federal and the state funding, so we definitely want to take advantage of that. So yes, we're communicating with a grant writer that reached out to the city, and we'll also be putting out some bids out to competitively seek grant writers as well. There is a lot of opportunity.
Thank you.
And in addition to that, the Caltrans one for the cleanup, I think that one, because that's a reimbursable.
Correct, and
That one
yeah,
works.
we have some grants that that are already in the works and applied to projects, and yes, there's new ones coming out as well.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? And that's all I had. Do we?
So the recommendation would be for you to receive the mid-year 2021 report and to approve the budget adjustments as presented in attachment A.
I'll go out to public comment first, though.
Yes, thank you.
And seeing none in-house, we'll take it out. And seeing none out in the Zoom or telephone, we'll bring it back for final consideration or questions. And no questions, can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the budget report as presented, and we accept the
Approve the budget.
the budget modifications.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante.
Yes.
Councilmember Arona.
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Mayor Hurek.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right. Now moving on to item number 8.
8.
Item number 8. It was 7, now it's 8. Isn't that 9? Number 8, if we can have that ready.
Fiscal forecasts and financial policies for fiscal year 22 through 24 financial plan. Approve fiscal forecasts and financial policies for the fiscal year 22-24 financial plan development.
Thank you. So we're right now at the very beginning of the financial plan development. That's what I have reported on during the city manager's report. We have the first workshop set for this Thursday at 6 p.m. And we'll begin these conversations and we'll begin to receive input from the community. This chart here is just something that shows the overall development and the flow of where we start and how do we land and get to the budget adoption. So we'll start with the financial forecast. The financial forecasts are really there to provide you with context of how much money is available, and the long-term forecasts are really there to look at fiscal sustainability. So it's not a question of detailed review of each account, it's a question of looking at your long-term needs for expenditures. The capital improvement program drives much of that, and also making sure that our ongoing revenues are meeting our ongoing expenditures for all operating funds. So we start with the community outreach, which will start this Thursday. We'll collect all of the public input. This is the first time that we are issuing a survey to the public to receive their input for priorities and funding, and which areas really we should be working on over the next 2 years. So the survey will be available, or is available online, will be available through February 11th, and will then be used for preparation of materials for your goal setting session on February 26th. At the same time, we engage internally in budget reviews, so each department is starting to evaluate their operations, which will then be presented through the financial plan development. As I've mentioned, there will be a preliminary plan presented to you in May, and then we'll take that input. The preliminary plan will be based on the goals that you set on February 26th. And then finally in June, both the operating programs and the capital expenditure program will be presented to you for final adoption. So let's take a look at these graphs, and you will see that on this one, this is just the general fund. And just remember, the general fund is primarily funded by our economic engine, which is tourism. So about 60% comes directly from tourism, which is available for city operations. Our top revenues are the TOT, tourism hotel tax, followed by sales tax. Just for comparison, we receive about 4.4 million in TOT and only 1.4 in sales tax. And then a third one is the property tax, also at about 1.4 a year. So the revenue here is depicted in green, while the expenditures for operations are depicted in gray going forward. And then the graph in orange depicts all of the expenditures for operations in the capital, while the graph in yellow shows only capital improvement program. So you will see that the blue line, which is the fund balance, drops significantly if the city was to proceed with all of the projects that are currently planned in the 10-year capital improvement program. This fund is healthy, however, in its ongoing obligations. So you will see that the gray line of expenditures on an ongoing basis is actually below the revenue in green. So this fund is doing the best of the three, however, and we also have a very healthy fund balance of about $11 million, which far exceeds the minimum requirements by Government Fiscal Officers Association, and it also actually funds more than a year worth of operations. However, there is a lot of needs in the capital improvement program, so if you review those projects, if we were actually to proceed with those, we would be depleting the funds fairly quickly. So this is the water fund, and this is important to keep in mind as we move forward with the utility rate study, which is why that process is so essential. This shows, once again, the same colors apply, and you will see that the revenue currently, without any increases, is extremely flat. It's basically a flat line. And our expenditures, of course, based on inflation, are increasing every year. So you will see that this fund is not structurally balanced. It's supposed to be funded within itself, which is the proper way of doing it to ensure that we have adequate resources to continuously maintain this very important infrastructure. As you know, water for the city of Solvang comes about 50% from the state when we have those allocations, and about 50% from the wells. So that's why we're working on a river wells project. The state allocation this year was 5%. They're being told that it may be 0 next year. It sounds like we might get a slightly better allocation, but it's still very low. So it's pretty certain that we'll be coming back to you as council for a request to purchase additional water in order to meet our annual supplies. So rate increases are in order to just continue to operate within this fund. You will see that currently our fund balance is healthy, however, it's declining quickly if we're actually going to move forward with those projects. So once again, the capital improvement projects are shown there at the cost in yellow, and if we address all of the water infrastructure projects in this case, we would be in the negative very quickly. So that is why the rate study is so essential, and the rate study does take into account the 10-year capital improvement program that will be interpreted into those proposed rates. The wastewater fund is in the worst condition to where we are already, if we take into account depreciation expenditures, we are diving into a negative as of now. So this fund is, or this forecast shows once again that the revenues are not sufficient to meet the operations. And we have very significant needs. We are currently applying for permit for operating the wastewater treatment plant. There's new regulations. And also the discussions about the significant phase 2 of the wastewater treatment operating plant, as well as we'll be coming back to you with recommendations and considerations for recycled water. That's the capital improvement projects that are driving it, and the rate study is also taking those into account that will be incorporated into the proposed rates. We do propose in the rate study that there would be a delay on any additional capital improvement program expenditures because we currently don't have the funds in the bank for that. So there will be some delay in moving forward with the sewer replacement, which you just received earlier today, as well as moving forward with the large wastewater treatment plant upgrade, or at least that's what's recommended. Otherwise, financing options for a fund in this shape are not recommended until we have an ability to rebuild it. So the only change in recommendations to the financial policies were first introduced and adopted in the form which you see in 2019-2020. The only change that's recommended here is to move away from having a set static goal for the capital improvement reserve within water and wastewater funds, and to just move towards a more conservative approach and have 6 months of regular ongoing operating expenses available in those funds. As I mentioned, we currently have a lot more available in the general fund, which exceeds 1 year of operations. And the recommendation based on the rate study for the utilities is to achieve this goal by fiscal year of 2025-26, which gives us the goal and some time to replenish those funds. So those are the recommendations for tonight. And just once again, to set context, that we'll have the workshop coming up on the 27th. The revenue projections will be included for the 2-year financial plan in a little bit more detail, so you'll have some dollar amounts to consider in terms of what may be the minimum and maximum that you could consider for appropriation for the financial plan. We'll also have an update for you on city programs and capital improvement program as of the current year. And then we'll present to you the format for the survey that's currently posted, which you could comment on, discuss the goal setting session, and just receive any public input that we may already collect in the next few days. And that concludes my report.
Are there any questions of the staff report at this time?
No.
It really hurts to see all that going down for the wastewater and the water. So it's almost like we can't get that rate increase fast enough to be able to help fund that. Anyway, that's about my only comment.
And TOT maybe.
Yeah.
A lot of the hotels that are fueling a lot of the wastewater and something to think about down the road.
Yeah.
You mean increasing the TOT? Yeah.
Where else?
That's been suggested a couple of times. It's something we might want to consider.
If there's any other questions, we'll take it out for public comment. Seeing none, we'll bring it back for public comment on Zoom or television or telephone. Seeing none, we'll bring it back for final comment and a motion to approve the fiscal forecast.
One last comment. I think Councilman Clark brought up a great idea. Our current TOT is what, 12.5%, I believe?
It's 12%.
12%, thank you. Can you give us by next meeting a rough idea of what would happen if we increased it to 12.5%?
And 13.
And 13?
I can certainly give you estimates of what dollar amount that
Yeah,
would
just
result in.
rough numbers, just to give us an idea to see what we would gain out of it. And the other question, I guess, would be how quickly could we implement that to get the revenues flowing? Thank you.
You'd also think about
One other, if I could add to that, I don't even know this, what other cities comparable that are similar to, what is the range of the low to the high on their TOTs to see if we're in line with that. I'm sure there's got to be cities out there that are 15%, there's got to be cities out there that are 9%.
Well, San Francisco, I think, is over 14. I don't remember what it is
Yeah,
exactly.
I have that data and I can pull it by the next
Yeah,
meeting.
just to-
12 is pretty average nowadays.
Yeah.
So
And just keep in mind that'll require a vote of the people to increase the TOT.
The TOT, I wasn't aware of that.
I wasn't either. We have to take it to a public vote, and that costs $30,000 just to throw a vote, right?
And it has to be at a specific election, it can't be at just any general election, so it would be
Understood.
probably November 2022, I think at the earliest.
Oh, so we're not gonna get done earlier anyhow.
However, I don't think the residents would be too averse to shifting the burden
Oh,
to our visitors.
Yeah.
I don't think you get a lot of no votes on that one.
It would be interesting to hear the numbers, if we could, from the staff, I'd appreciate it, thank you very much.
of course.
Also begs the question again, for sales tax, which I know you had provided.
I'm not a big fan of it, but yes, I mean, when you think about this, if you increase your sales tax 1%, that money goes directly to the city. So you're basically doubling the money that what do we generate, what does the city get in
We
sales tax?
generate 1.4%, we only get 1%, we don't have any local tax. There's very few jurisdictions that don't have a local tax like us. So from an economic perspective, it's highly unlikely there would be any loss of purchasing power within the city if we went with an increase of 1%. Once again, that would require a vote of the people. Would have to be general election for general tax and special election for special tax. So if you were to consider something for this upcoming election, that would be only a special tax option, and it costs about $10,000 per ballot for the election.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
sometimes you have to spend money to make money, right?
Can't believe I said tax.
Yeah, I know.
It's my third rail.
Yeah. All right. So, there was no extra public comment. Do we have a motion to approve the fiscal forecast and financial policies?
Yeah, I move that we approve the report.
I'll second it.
May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante.
Yes?
Councilmember Arona.
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Mayor Hurick.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on to item number 10. Madam Clerk, would you please read grand jury report?
Is it number 9?
I mean 9, I'm sorry. I'm looking at it. Number 9, excuse me.
Response to grand jury report, pensions in Santa Barbara County require vigilance. Approve response to the grand jury report titled Pensions in Santa Barbara County Require Vigilance as presented in attachment A.
Okay, so this is a grand jury report, proposed response to the grand jury report. The grand jury has issued a report that calls a response from the city of Solvang as well as all other cities within the Santa Barbara County. The title of the report is Pensions in Santa Barbara County Require Vigilance. It was issued on December the 17th of 2021, so fairly recently. We are required to respond as a city within 90 days. The city of Solvang, just to note, is listed as less potential for pension plan solvency risk jurisdiction, so that's good. I just want to give you a little bit of overview. We have overall 3 plans, but with CalPERS, the CalPERS is the provider of retirement to our employees. We are one of many jurisdictions in California. In fact, CalPERS covers most of the jurisdictions in California for municipalities. And we have 3 different plans, as I mentioned. One's the miscellaneous, which is an older plan. We have a tiny little public safety plan, which only has a couple of fire employees that used to work for the city of Solvang a long time ago before Solvang became part of the county district for fire. And then we have PEPRA. PEPRA was a plan that was established by the state, which was to minimize costs of the pensions, so the benefits of PEPRA are lowered. The good news for us is actually about half of our employees are enrolled in PEPRA, which has very little unfunded liability, and those benefits being are less likely to create future risks as well, although that is possible if there's market losses. What's also good for us is that we don't have public safety, where most jurisdictions see really high unfunded liability, and most of the risk for them is in public safety plans. So if you have your own fire or police, those benefits were increased back in, I want to say, the 90s, when the plans were super funded, where there was more funds than the projections actuarial analysis showed was needed. So a lot of the public agencies gave increased benefits to public safety, but then didn't adjust any of the policies that applied, which now result in really high unfunded liabilities. We don't have that problem, but we do have this miscellaneous plan, which does have a fairly significant unfunded liability. So you will see that the first item there represents the present value of the projected benefits. There's entry age accrued liability. Then you see the market's value of assets, which is the estimate of what all of our assets, the dollars that we have invested, that are being invested by the CalPERS board and earning interest. That's the amount of assets we have. And then underneath that, you have the unfunded accrued liability. That's based on the actuarial analysis, the amount that we currently don't have in the plan and we'll need to make up somehow in the future. So the CalPERS has made many modifications to their policy to stabilize the fund since 2015, including limiting the amortization periods. They used to have 30-year rolling amortization periods where they used to never catch up. So they've become a lot more aggressive, but it also resulted in a lot more cost for the member jurisdictions. You also see that based on policies and changes in applied discount rate to be more conservative, from year to year, as those policies are applied to the actuarial analysis, you will see that some years you will see the increase in unfunded liability based on those phasing in of those policies. So by June 30 of 2020, our funded ratio for the city of Solvang for this plan was 72.7%, which fell down from 73.6%. And we also have a $5 million unfunded liability. This chart here shows some of the policies that are already in place by CalPERS, and this is the kind of dollar amounts and increases that are baked into all of our financial forecasts that you just saw. So you will see the normal cost, which is what we're paying for our current employees. And then you'll see the UAL payment, which is just paying down that unfunded liability. So you see that it continues to increase through the year 2027, 28. That's the result of the last major change when CalPERS had decreased their interest rate or rate that they, in the long run, were expecting to receive from 7.5% to 7%. So as of recently, CalPERS has actually had a really good year last year in terms of their earnings, but because they're being more conservative, they've also adopted policies such as when a return on investment is above a certain threshold, the interest rate that's expected to be earned drops again, which then increases our payments. So in light of that, here are the findings and the responses that are proposed for the city of Solvang. The finding 1A is the cities of Buellton, Carpinteria, Goleta, Guadalupe, Solvang, and the county of Santa Barbara are at less potential pension plan solvency risk. The city of Solvang does agree. The city of Solvang agrees that the projected city's pension funded levels versus unfunded liability remains in a stable range. You also agree that the CalPERS pension costs should be closely monitored and agrees to present a comprehensive plan to address the pension costs in the long run by June 30, 22. The city is able to meet its required contributions to CalPERS based on the latest available actuarial report. Finding 1C is unfunded accrued liabilities have risen for all cities since 2016 with the announced change in the discount rate. expected to rise further, which would impact the city's ability to deliver expected services to residents. Our response as proposed is to agree, and our comments are, although the reduced discount rate will have an impact by increasing the amount of future payments to CalPERS, the recently announced annual CalPERS rate of return at 21.3% will have a positive impact on future liability payments. The city will continue to closely monitor the actuarial statements from CalPERS and will develop strategies to manage further potential policy actions by CalPERS board to stabilize the pension fund. Many other factors, including salary changes and increases, actuarial assumptions, and future investment returns, will surely impact the annual payments the city is required to make. As in prior fiscal years, the city's adopted budget will continue to ensure all required payments are adequately appropriated. The city will balance its operating and capital budget by considering potential service level impacts, explore revenue generating solutions, and other budget balancing options. Recommendation number 1 is that the City Council and the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors develop and publish a comprehensive plan by June 30, 2022, addressing their pension plans and how they intend to properly assure future obligations are paid when due, without impacting the timely delivery of essential and promised services to the residents. Our response is that this will be implemented. The City of Solvang evaluated its pension obligations with multiple presentations made to the City Council in fiscal year 2019-20. The city is able to meet projected pension obligations, and the payments are included in the city's long-term fiscal forecasts. However, the city will continue to proactively develop long-term strategies to be able to meet its obligations without significant impacts to operations. And specific recommendations will be developed as part of fiscal year 2022-24 financial plan development and will be prepared by June 30, 2022. Finding 2 is the statement by the grand jury is that Section 115 trusts, pension obligation bonds, and pension reserve funds can be effective mechanisms to protect cities from dramatic impacts to the financial markets or declines in general fund revenues. The proposed response is to partially disagree. Section 115 trusts or reserves set aside to meet pension obligations can be effective tools to protect cities as budget balancing tool. If required contributions are increased by CalPERS based on earnings, market fluctuations, or CalPERS board policy changes, such funds can be applied toward the payment. These are planning tools which would allow for smoothing of cash payments and will result in more stable levels of ongoing operations. The Section 115 trust would also allow the city to invest in similar strategies as CalPERS, which could potentially result in higher earnings than the city can achieve from its pooled cash investments. The pension obligation bonds are risky and are generally not recommended by financial consultants who have studied the subject matter. That's basically refinancing of debt, and that is risky, and there's some examples where jurisdictions ended up in a bad place by developing that strategy. So my recommendation would be not to pursue pension obligation bonds. But there's actually one more recommendation, 2, that the City Council and Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors study and determine by June 30, 2022 whether a Section 115 pension trust, pension obligation bond, or pension reserve fund would be an effective hedged against risk to their pension plans for the city. The response is that this will be implemented. The city will evaluate the tools and will prepare a report by June 30, 2022. That concludes my report.
Are there any questions on the report?
I have one.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm reading this right, but CalPERS is forecasting a rate of return of 21%. That's not an ROI, is it, on the investment?
So they actually received a return from the investments in last year that was that high.
And they're not forecasting that to be consistent?
No, they are not. So they are actually recommending, I believe the policy says that if they exceed a certain level, which I think is 11% or so, then the applied rate of return to the actuarial analysis drops by, I believe it's 2 decimal points.
Yeah.
So that would mean that instead of 7%, when we get our next actuarial analysis, we'll see a discount rate applied of about 6.8%, which will then drive all the actuarial analysis up again, even though we had this good gain in our assets. So just a back of the napkin calculation, I think we'll still be in the negative and see more increases based on this policy. And the policy is really there to continue to stabilize their fund because they were so close to drop into levels that were unsustainable.
No further questions?
I just had a couple of comments, and one of them would be starting on page 294, which is the responses. On this, I noticed your report.
I know where you're going,
Sure.
because we will correct some of the typos in the report before we submit it.
And on finding 1A, and then we didn't actually do a response to 1A. It went finding 1A, and then.
I'm sorry, that's a typo as well, so it should say, it's finding 1A, and underneath that it should say City of Solvang responds to finding 1A, because it's 1A that applies to us.
Right, and then in 1B, do we actually have a response in 1B, because that's where it's talking about the other ones?
We don't need to respond to 1B, I believe, because those were 1A and 1B were specific to the
Cities. And
cities,
the
yes. So 1B was for those cities that are considered higher potential pension plan solvency risk.
Right, okay, I just want to make.
We'll make sure to correct all of those
Like I
typos.
did on the report, but I saw on yours it still had 1B. I just wanted to make sure it was 1A.
Thank you.
And then, do we, at this time, need to come to some agreement for this report to figure out what kind of a recommendation we want to do for 2? I know we did the City of Solvang response to finding 2 was partially, so is it going to be disagree partially or partially disagree? I know it's semantics, but
I believe they do provide us with specific language that we're supposed to give them. And when it comes to recommendations, is this a recommendation? It's a finding. So for findings, we can agree, disagree wholly, disagree partially with an explanation. So we're disagreeing partially with an explanation.
But do we need to provide you with any of the plans that we think might be best for us at this time?
So basically,
We're just disagreeing partially and let it go at that.
correct. So the report does state that, in this sense, that the grand jury says that obligation bonds may be a good way to address pensions. And we basically disagree in that respect with an explanation saying that obligation bonds are risky.
Right. But we don't have to provide you right now with one of the 3
No,
that
so
we feel as a consensus we should.
if you approve this response as presented with just those clarifications on the typos, then between now and June 30 is what this promises. We would have those conversations with you to where you would adopt an improvement plan.
That answered my question. That's what I was just wondering if.
Isn't an obligation bond like taking a loan to pay a credit card?
Yes.
Using your MasterCard to pay your Visa.
Ay, ay, ay. How did we get to this point?
All right.
Now, grand jury reports or requests are just that, they're requests, they're not any kind of mandate from a county grand jury, is that correct?
That's correct, and there's a statutory process for responding under the penal code, so that's what Xenia mentioned. There are specific responses that we're required to do, but it's more of a aspirational report.
You know, we're not required to agree with anything, but
No.
just to respond.
Okay.
That's correct.
And that's all. I just wanted to confirm it.
That's a good point.
Okay. So do we want to have a motion to approve the
Take it to
response?
Take it to public.
Oh, public comment.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, both of you.
Not to hang out, really, it's a formality.
No public comment. We'll take it out to Zoom and or telephone. No Zoom or telephone comments. Bring it back for final or a motion.
Yeah, I move that we approve the report in response to the grand jury
Is there a
report.
second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante.
Yes?
Councilmember Arona.
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Mayor Uhrig.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right. You guys want to continue going or take a little break?
We've only got 2 things left to do.
2 left to go. All right, let's keep it going. All right, moving on to item number 10. Did I get that right this time?
Marketing
Please
contract.
read into the agenda.
542.
Go, I'm sorry.
Marketing contract, Tourism Advisory Committee, and staff recommendations. Receive an update on Tourism Advisory Committee recommendations for marketing contract and provide staff with policy direction.
Okay, thank you for that. So this item in front of you today, because you had provided with some direction before on marketing and tourism, and we've been working with the Tourism Advisory Committee for a while now, and this is a report back with where we stand today and their latest recommendations. So the recommendation today is to receive an update on Tourism Advisory Committee recommendations for marketing contract and provide staff with policy direction. So this is fully within your discretion to provide any policy direction as you would like. The TAC, as I mentioned, has been working for a while now on developing recommendations for marketing going forward, and at their last meeting, they voted with a vote of 4-1 of those who were present to recommend an extension with COGS and Marvel for another 6 months through December 31 of 2022. So staff recommendation is actually going to be different. Once again, this is completely within your discretion as to the direction that you provide today. But staff recommendation is to go ahead and continue to work on or issue the request for proposals as is put together and presented as part of this report. So as a background of where we are today, the Tourism Advisory Committee was formed by the City Council with the following duties and responsibilities, which essentially they are an advisory body to the City Council. They don't make final decisions, but they do make recommendations for your consideration. It's a body of 7, where 5 of them were appointed specifically individually by each one of you, and 2 additional members could be appointed by your majority vote, which you did appoint a total of 7. Their overall responsibilities are to review marketing efforts, make recommendations for additional efforts or strategy, and to make recommendations on budget as well as oversee any budget appropriations that are in line with council direction and the contracts. So the TAC was formed on August 9, 2021. 7 members were appointed on September 13 of 2021. U.S. City Council had directed staff to work on development of a request for proposals with the TAC for future marketing services. The TAC had recommended extension of contract with Cox and Marvel. Cox and Marvel is now what used to be known as IDK in a way, where Scott has joined this larger firm that's about 45 or so employees. So the contract would be with Cox and Marvel through June 30, 2022, to allow more time for the TAC and the city to develop scope of work for requests for proposals. Council approved extension of contract based on this TAC recommendation through July 31, 2022, in order to accommodate management of the July 4th event, and that is what we are currently finalizing with Cox and Marvel in terms of the contract negotiation, but that's already approved. He also allocated another $300,000 towards that contract for the rest of the year. The TAC requested review of marketing structure, which was presented to them on January 6th, which is in attachment A. And when they met at the last council meeting, the last TAC meeting, they recommended another extension for the contract with IDK through December 31, 2022 to add another 6 months while they continue to review the options. One of their discussion points was that they wanted to give Cox and Marvel a full year to focus on programs for the city of Solvang. However, staff recommendation is based on the fact that if we go ahead and move forward with requests for proposals, there's still all of the flexibility for you to approve contract with anyone or make any changes to that structure. We have enough information from the TAC, which we'll get to in a minute here, in terms of what they appear to favor or think is important for marketing for the city of Solvang. And we're also going into the next 2-year financial plan, so it would be ideal to give the possibility for the city to reset through the next 6 months, go through the process of looking at what's available and then making a decision for maybe a longer contract, maybe even a 2-year contract for that financial plan, or whichever structure you would like to establish. But it's basically that milestone that just really well aligns at this point versus just taking it through another additional 6 months and then having to readjust. I just wanted to show you this, which is a chart that I had put together for the TAC, and there's more detail available in the report in attachment A. This does a comparison of the marketing investment before the contracts with IDK, which used to be a contract with SCVB, and the current contract. So on the left, you see the SCVB fiscal year 18-19 costs. Those were the last approved budgets for SCVB, and it also shows the type of operations that were funded through that contract. So there was actually quite a bit of revenue coming in from the events. Those were the 3 major events, which was Yulefest, Taste of Solvang, and Stomp, that the city of Solvang consistently held. You'll see that those 3 events generated $155,000 back then. About $29,000 was spent on advertisement, and there was some retail that was being sold. Those were the revenue, or actually advertising was another income, so we were charging others, or SCVB was charging others to advertise. And then on the expenditures, the makeup was that about $140,000 was spent on the events, which would still make those profitable in a way. Operating expense, some of that might be towards events, was $51,000. There was promotionals of 268. Print media was pretty high, 183. Visitor center was also under umbrella of the SCVB. And there's the staff and salary for 152. And then trade shows. So some of the items you see that used to be priorities under SCVB, such as the print media and the travel shows, which no longer appear in the current contract scope. Then on the right, you see the breakdown of the current contract scope for the current fiscal year, which is in 2 chunks. Essentially, it was the first 6 months, and then the remaining 6 months through July. This is on an annual basis, so it's not through July, this is through June. But you will see that the focus is completely different. There's $35,000 for the branding, which we're still continuing to work on. That's what's going to DRC at the next meeting. There's the permit administration, which is something that used to be managed within the city internal structure and was transferred to IDK when they were retained for Yulefest event, and has been managed by them since then. We are working on improvements, recommended improvements to that process that we found to be necessary now that we are post-COVID and we are actually experiencing the work, and no adjustments need to be made there. The visitor center redesign, $20,000. We're still working on that. External marketing and digital assets was $120,000 for the production of those 7 short videos, which have been completed. Yule Fest one was already rolled out, and the other 6 will continue to be rolled out over the next 6 months. There was the Yule Fest event expense. That's what the city paid for the Yule Fest management that just occurred, or whatever was presented for Yule Fest. Executive producer was Scott at the cost of $37,000. This social post and strategy, 3 posts a week at $60,000. PR strategy for 15. PR placements and FAM coming into town doing stories at 30. Once again, another permit administration account director, once again Scott, and then we have a couple of events at $75,000. So you see that the structure is very different. There's no revenue coming in from these events at this point. We are comparing the budget under 18-19, which was up to $798,000, and right now we are at $699 a year currently. So the scope of work, once again, the staff recommendation is to go ahead and issue this request for proposals. You have the request for proposals put together as attachment B. I went ahead and took everything that I've heard from the TEC in terms of their discussions and where they felt what elements of marketing was important. Those are depicted here in this brief summary. It's important to note that if the city does issue a request for proposals, there's no obligation for the city to take any of those contracts. The city could still extend the contract with Cox and Marvel or go with any alternative structure. And we do allow in this request for proposals for the proposal to identify additional elements that they might propose to the city, which could be, a venue for those who are in the marketing field to be creative and provide additional value. So here we are asking for marketing strategy, management, brand development, social media, quarterly events, productions, and management to attract tourism promotions, strategy, and visitor center management to be part of the scope. There has been sufficient input received from TAC at this point to incorporate into the RFP. This would allow the city to evaluate marketing services as part of overall 2-year financial plan development and goal setting. TAC will have continued opportunity to provide input to the city council through this process, so the TAC will still receive those proposals in response to the city's request, and will be able to evaluate them and provide the city council with additional recommendations. And the city, of course, reserves the right to reject all proposals, so there's still flexibility in this process. That concludes my report.
Are there any questions of the staff report?
I do have a few questions. First of all, I want to thank everybody that serves in the TAC committee. It takes a lot of time to make all of these happen. There's a lot of things to consider, and they're coming up with ways to improve our marketing and event management and town promotion, starting from scratch. So thank you so much to all the members. So now I wonder, because last time that we talked about this, we talked about extending the contract. They needed more time, and I do see that we have a lot of comments, recommendations, and things that everybody has put together that is sufficient to create a request for proposal. Why are they asking for an extension of the contract? Why do they feel that they need more time?
So some of the discussion from the TAC when they made this last recommendation was desire to allow IDK or Cox and Marvel time to create a year-long program versus the short-term steps. And they also wanted more time to continue to develop the request for proposals. I think they also still had some question as to whether or not they would want to consider alternatives organizational structures. So for example, if you look at the report in your packet on page 546, some of the things that they were considering were, what does it look like if it's with a contractor? What does it look like if it's another organization formed such as SCVB? Or what does it look like if it's internal staff? And there's different benefits and downfalls with each one of those structures. But what I am saying is that if we issue the request for proposals, it essentially doesn't hurt much. It's limited. The request has been put together based on input we have to date from the TAC. It can be available and advertised when we receive the input or whatever proposals. It's not overly cumbersome for staff to overview that and present that to TAC so that they have additional information that may feed into their recommendations. And both the TAC and the City Council will still have the ability to continue through the financial plan development to consider, what structure you want to see, what are the priorities, and what funds you want to allocate over the next 2 years towards tourism and marketing. So to me, it's just the right time right now to go ahead and it's basically intelligence if we issue it to see what's available.
What obligations are we under contract for now?
At this point, you have approved an execution of contract with Cogs and Marble
Through June?
through July 31st.
July 31st.
And we are still working on completing that contract just because there's some terms that need to be ironed out.
Just in general conversation, I'm still bothered from the experiences we had with IDK before, not from the standpoint of their marketing expertise. I was pretty impressed with that, but their on-the-ground services here, I thought was terrible. I go back to the car show and the people trying to get a hold of somebody to help them out took, 2-3 weeks, I think, before they could make contact. Is there something that we want to just, in general, consider maybe a bifurcated program where our marketing is done from somebody like IDK or their new parent company, that has the expertise to be sending out the information, so forth, but still, and have an on-the-ground force here that could help do what Charlie used to do, basically. Could we, look at somebody that could be close to us? Well, it's something like that, but that would be, close to here and would work for us, but we'd still be getting the marketing through a national or international marketing firm. Is that something that's could be on the table?
That is absolutely something that could be on the table. If you would pull up my slide again for a second, you would notice that on this scope of work, there's actually no mention of specifically requirement to manage our permitting of the events. So we can definitely bifurcate that and bring that closer to in-house.
That's just kind of where my mind's going. I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but I would like to have an on-the-ground organization here to help people, with a phone call or, meet them for coffee on the street. That kind of relationship, I think, is important. And I also recognize that the relationship of expertise in advertising and, data and so forth nationally is very important as well.
So if I understand your approach, excuse me, let's issue an RFP and see what comes in. We're not under any obligation to pick anybody if we don't want to. We hand all that information to TAC, let TAC say yes, no, we're gonna do something else.
Correct.
I think it's an interesting idea. The scope of work that you just displayed again bothers me because it doesn't say anything about website development. Because that Solvang USA that IDK Cogs and Marble runs allows people to make reservations at hotels. It lets people see what's on events, all of that stuff, and none of that's in the scope of work. You list past events, but you don't say that's what we have to come up with. So how is somebody gonna bid when they don't know what events they have to bid on? Are they just supposed to come up with their own? I mean, what I see in this RFP, that's I don't know, 20 pages of RFP and half a page of scope. If I was gonna try and respond to this, I would object a little bit, or ask a hell of a lot of questions, let me put it that way. So that part of your idea bothers me, because I think the scope is inadequate for the kind of response that I suspect you're looking for. I know you want to give them some latitude to give you ideas, and I think that's great. But we still have some minimum requirements, and I'm not seeing them in this scope of work.
I would say that this was fairly broad, so when it comes to social media management, and we can definitely clarify, yes, the company would be managing the Solvang USA website, so we can make some of those clarifications.
Do we have to define specific events that we want to have happen every year?
I don't believe you necessarily want to do that. I mean, I think the TAC is still working through that right now, because some of the events, I'm trying to remember the name of it. For example, the Taste of Solvang is no longer Taste of Solvang. It's a Taste of something else. So some of these events have transitioned out through this transition. So I think you're looking more about an approach and qualifications of whoever is going to be responding in terms of how would they go about advising the city of what events would make sense, which is exactly, frankly, what IDK does now. And that's the conversation between the consultant, IDK, Cogs and Marble, whoever is in that seat, if that's the structure that we go forward with, and the TAC, to where they can review and recommend events for the city of Solvang. There's some long-standing events, such as Yule Fest, Danish Days, which is actually not fully paid by the city just contributes. But additional events for marketing would be recommended by the marketing consultant and then discussed with the TAC, and then would come to you, City Council, for approval.
Did the TAC know that IDK had merged or been bought up or whatever by this new firm when they came up with this recommendation?
They've been informed of that, yes.
Okay. And
I think a lot of people, sorry to interrupt you, I think a lot of people still refer to the contract as IDK just because everybody's familiar with Scott Shoemaker.
Okay, I just wonder if now that they are part of another firm, if their performance is gonna change, we haven't met their partners, like I'm super uncomfortable extending a contract with a company that we know nothing about. We know Scott, we know IDK, but we don't know what position he holds in this company. We might as well issue an RFP if we're gonna be working with new people anyway, and take the opportunity to come up with a request of services the way that we want them, so that they're specific and both we know what to expect and they know that what we expect of them.
Well, I believe you stated in your notes that Cogs and Marble wanted the opportunity to respond to an RFP.
Correct, yes.
So that would be one way of assuring that we got some information about them.
Correct.
Has this RFP been presented to the TAC?
It has not at this point. So they voted to bring to you recommendation to extend the contract through December 31, 2022. I think it's timely that we have this conversation now and consider issuing the RFP because I think it's important to align it with the next 2 years' goals in the financial plan development, and that would really allow you to have the conversations through that process when you review operations and availability of funds and how you want to prioritize those, the options for having more in-house management for events, closer contact there versus whatever you might want to.
Max's information on here, his requests for building a, as Jim put it, boots on the ground organization that does the marketing. It's hard to read his hand scratching. You got this guy writing lessons or something. But I have a great deal of respect for Max's experience, knowledge in the city. And this idea is actually pretty good if I'm reading it. I wish Max were here to present it to us. But you're ignoring this. You're just saying, let's go out for an RFP, and you're forgetting what TAC has requested here?
No, so if I may clarify, the TAC had requested, specifically, Mark Hamburg had requested, when he presented what's included in the packet, to bring an item to TAC to consider alternative, essentially organizational structures for the way that marketing is provided. There was some general consensus on the TAC that they wanted to see that, which was presented to them at the January meeting, which is your attachment A to the report. On page 546, you have a SWOT analysis for the various options that the city could take. Now, you as City Council had directed staff to go ahead and work with TAC on development of RFP, which is what I am continuing to do today. But you could consider other options, such as forming Max's idea, essentially surrounded around forming some organization that's similar to SCVB, that is more local. So you will see on page 546, there's 3 alternatives discussed, which one is contracted to a private company, one will be performed by a city employee, and one performed by a nonprofit organization. I would say that if I was to sum the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that were presented to the TAC, which they didn't discuss in detail at all, is that if you go with a private company, you can reach to any available contractors who are specializing in the field. With a private company, I would say that there is the least transparency that can be achieved because they're a for-profit company. When it comes to forming an organization such as an SCVB, there is more transparency and more local connection. But the way that SCVB was formed before, there was less connection with the city council because it was really governed by SCVB board.
Was this graphic put together by the TAC or you?
Me.
Yeah. Because I never heard anybody from there talking about this type of an approach. And I'm not sure that I would agree with the assessments done in here. I have mixed feelings about this, but frankly, the idea of putting out an RFP when you're not gonna, basically you're saying, well, we're not gonna give you a contract, but give us an RFP anyway, or give us a proposal anyway, I think is not an honest approach. If you wanted to say, give us your ideas, fine. And then maybe we'll put them into an RFP and go out, that's one thing. But that RFP is a legal contract. And I know it says, we don't owe you anything just for responding to this, but you don't have a scope of work. You don't have, so how can you compare A, B, and C if everyone's gonna come up with their own scope of work? I'm not, so I wouldn't support this RFP the way it's written right now, and I think it should go back to the TAC.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Clark.
It sounds like the council would probably benefit by listening to or asking some of the questions we're addressing towards you, to the TAC or to Scott, to have some of these issues resolved, because it's almost like we're throwing hypothetical questions at you. I have no problem at all with an RFP, but I also trust the decisions that the TAC made because we appointed them. But it sounds like we have questions here that can't be answered in this room right now. As far as, is Scott working with, is it COGS or is it Scott, blah, blah, blah. These are questions we should be getting answers to, but I think we're asking the wrong people right now. So do we want to have somebody from TAC come and talk about this, or have Scott come in and talk about this?
I should point out one of the concerns I have about having Scott come in and talk about it is if he is going to be submitting a proposal,
Making his own
forming the
scope.
proposal could conflict him out,
Yeah.
because then he's participating in the making of a contract in which he's got a financial interest, which would be a Government Code Section 1090 problem. So we tend to want to have a more hands-off approach from those who are preparing an RFP. TAC is a good example. They don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. They're not going to be proposing, so they can be more objective about providing it. But if you have a contractor who is going to bid, set up the specifications, they can do so in such a way that might exclude everybody else because they're the only ones who can do it. And so that's why it's dangerous to have them participating in that process. They can certainly provide you input on what they have succeeded in and what they think the city could do, but actually forming the RFP itself could be a problem for them.
Can I point that out on that?
But not for the TAC.
And this is, I think what you're saying is correct, but that we're looking at two separate things right now. Okay, take away the RFP and take that away from Scott or whoever. But Scott's currently under contract and we have questions of the way things are being run. So that's the point I'm trying to make, and the RFP was incidental, so.
Yeah, having your contractors come in and explain, that's fair game.
That's what I think we would like to, I would like to see, because, we can't get answers to the questions we're asking right now because we don't have people in front of us.
Right.
So I think once again, that's the circle that we've been in with the TACs, that yes, the TAC has been having discussions with Scott and Cogs and Marvel about the current ongoing work, but it would conflict out IDK, Cogs and Marvel from being able to apply for an RFP for the future scope. So the TAC at this point has not made specific recommendations for the RFP, because they've been essentially asking to have Scott or Cogs and Marvel give them recommendations on what that should be, and that's where we get into the circular issue of needing to move forward with this process, but without being careful not to conflict Cogs and Marvel from being able to apply for this RFP.
Is Scott a part of the TAC?
No.
Then why does he have to be a part of the conversation that TAC would have about the RFP?
Or we could even have the TAC come in and talk to us. We don't need Scott to talk to us.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
So the TAC is saying, hey, let's extend the contract, then we'll go think about an RFP. And you're saying, no, let's not do that. Let's do an RFP now and see what comes out of it. And so we're gonna ignore TAC, their requests, and go with yours, is what you're suggesting. And that's not, I don't support that.
If I may, I don't think anybody's suggesting that we are going to take TAC out of the equation and not take their thoughts, their recommendations into consideration of building an RFP. What we are saying is that we have a budget to set up. We have been operating under extension of contracts, and we've been kind of winging it as we go. And I think now we have enough information and enough experience to sit down with the TAC and pinpoint what it is that we expect out of whoever is doing our marketing and event management, and go ahead and request an RFP and have somebody commit to the whole package. We have almost 6 more months with IDK, and their contract is being negotiated, but we do have 6 more months. I think right now we are at a great time to work with the TAC to come up with an RFP, but I don't think we should wait another 6 months or another year to figure this out.
Well then, let's go Councilman Clark's idea, let's bring TAC in there to present to us what they think should be done, and we'll pay attention then. So can we put that on the next agenda? The next agenda was kind of light, I think.
Yeah, do you think, I'm sorry, but do you think it's worth having maybe a joint workshop where, more people that have a stake can have an input and we can talk about it and, we can just nail this down and get an RFP that we can all agree?
I'd be careful about how many people you're talking about.
Yeah.
Workshops are us. That's what we do.
We appointed some people to do this. I'd say let's work with them.
Yeah.
But I'm happy that we work with them, or that they come and maybe make a proposal, and then we can flesh some of this stuff out and come up with a game plan on what it is that we want.
Yeah, 'cause we're gonna keep going.
Once we decide what we want, then we'll decide who we want to do it.
Then let's just finish this up and have TAC come in and talk to us.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be the whole group,
No.
I mean, it could be 1 or 2 or 3 people from the TAC and explain what they
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
and make some decisions.
Or just one, let them pick a designate.
Was the one objection, was it Max, because he presented something a little bit different?
No, it was Tracy Beard.
Tracy wants to bid on it,
Not a big fan of IDK.
and that's understandable, so. But
I know, kind of running into the same problem we ran in a year ago, where we ended up just extending contracts, so I'm kind of hoping that we can get this, some RFP of what we feel.
Well, I think we need to define what we want.
Exactly.
And like I said, we need the expertise for outside marketing. I know like I say, Shelby helps, but I think, directed help here in our hotelers and so forth needs that expertise. But I think people on the ground here working our events is also critical.
I think it's very important. That's one thing that's been lacking for quite a while. I had a couple questions just related to, say, page 564, where it's talking about IDK. Let me get there real quick. The deliverables, and I just look at the term H2 2021, the branding refresh under direction of the city. We're supposed to have a website delivery almost 9 months ago, and I'm wondering why we're still having this discussion when we haven't seen anything. It keeps getting reiterated, keeps being part of their budget, and yet it says here that the website delivery no later than August 31 of last year.
Correct. So I
We
can
still
provide
haven't
some
seen that.
information. Back when this scope of work was created, the proposal by IDK was to create a brand new website.
Wasn't that though part of their original one back in
That was
2020?
part of 2020, so the delivery no later than August 31 was to include placeholders for branding, to leverage the existing infrastructure and apply new branding guidelines to site, transition web hosting services to a more cost-effective cost service, maintain up-to-date local business directory and information. I know that they have been working on updating the directory and information. It wasn't done by August 31st, but it has been updated. The leveraging of brand guidelines is something that ended up being addressed more so through the process of trying to update the City of Solvang official website instead, because we brought up the logo conversation and landed on the logo developed by Raina Karskov, and now we're in the process of kind of refining that logo and finding the color scheme, etc. And this process has definitely become longer, but the DRC has a lot of comments that they would like to incorporate and make it worthwhile. And the website they still haven't done. There was a little bit of a technical issue with the transfer of the asset to the city, to where they needed to get additional training, which they couldn't get from this host until the transition was completed. But we've definitely, the website redesign was part of prior contracts with IDK. And at some point, there was a realization that building a whole new website won't work because we would lose all of the connections through the internet that are built in within the current website where we are known and have those followers. So we're at this point awaiting for them to be able to modify our existing website, the Solving USA.
Then on page, well, the same page, looks like at the bottom of that, the external marketing and digital assets, they're supposed to create a QR code map no later than last year as well. And as far as I know, they have not done that.
They have not
It
done
was
that.
done by this chamber that Prevent did one.
Correct.
So
Did we pay them the $120,000?
well, it's part of the yearly budget.
The only payment we are holding back right now is the last payment for December, which amounts to $50,000 because there's several deliverables that are not delivered yet, which includes the website update, the QR code, the visitor center redesign, and I'm still waiting to receive the digital videos so that we have those in city's possession.
Good job.
So just for me, those are some of my concerns, that things that have been contracted out, from fiscal year last year are not getting done. And we're just continually throwing, kicking the can down the road again, so to speak. Yeah. And I'd like to see some type of RFP. And so again, just going with what everyone else is saying, maybe just bring someone from TAC. I would like to hear what Max had to say, maybe to clarify that, if he would be available to come. I have been talking to some of the other people in town that were part of the old SCVB, and I know that they're kind of hoping that that's kind of one of the directions that they would really like to see happen again. And I believe it goes back to being a local organization as opposed to being outside. And I think everyone kind of realizes that that part is not happening. However you want to describe that or attribute that to, whether it's a special event or whether it's other things that are getting missed. So, and then the last question I had was on one of the old RFPs, on page 578, it lists the bar guidelines for Exhibit B.
Yeah.
And I
That's
was
correct.
wondering why was that in there when?
So that was in there because actually it's important, I think, for the consultants to be familiar with the design guidelines, which is what your design review committee oversees. Yes, it does still say BAR, BAR, which was the prior organization with extremely similar duties as the design review committee. We haven't updated those design guidelines because, and that's, the design review committee is very careful about following them, believing that that's what makes the Solving what it is in terms of its architecture and being an attraction, a tourism destination. So I think it became clear, which especially with working with Cox and Marvel through the branding exercise, that they actually hadn't seen the design guidelines, and the recommendations that they were proposing were definitely not following those guidelines. So I thought it was really important to give a flavor of what Solving is, because that is really what created the destination that it is today.
Some historical knowledge. Okay, that was it. I just was kind of curious why.
So
And I get that part because that is important.
So if I may suggest from what I think I'm hearing is that I think the majority of you would like to have continued conversation with the Tourism Advisory Committee. You're not ready to issue an RFP today, but we're also not ready to extend the contract with Cox and Mar will be on point. So what I can do is take your feedback and your direction to the TAC, have them have another discussion. They will be appointing a new chair about this, make sure that there's clarity about Max Hamburg's proposal is discussed by TAC as well. And then perhaps their chair may come after their meeting and have a presentation as part of an agenda item.
When is
council.
our next meeting?
Their next meeting is
it a
the
couple
first,
weeks or?
it's the first Thursday of the month, so it's the
It's the
third.
7th of February, isn't it? No,
It's the 3rd of
planning,
February.
sorry.
February 3rd?
Perfect.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea.
Yes,
I mean, they wouldn't have to necessarily be here either, they could do a Zoom.
Zoom or, yeah, just
Correct.
to present.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so
Moving
we
on.
need to move on to public comment on that, or nothing? We'll move out to public comment as a formality,
Yeah.
bringing it back to public comment and Zoom, and none there. And just move forward with the recommendation.
Thank you.
And then finally, item number 11.
That's me.
Madam Clerk, could you please read the title?
Appoint Tourism Advisory Committee member due to resignation. Tourism Advisory Committee member Barry Prescott has resigned from the committee, resulting in a vacancy for the seat appointed by Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Clark may appoint an alternate committee member or direct staff to open a recruitment.
And the person, of the 3 people that have shown interest, the person that I was going to select has a conflict with this. So I have to ask that we could do this again at our next meeting. And I will have another appointment for you, if that's okay with you guys, and I apologize.
Sure. No worries. That'd be great.
And also, if you, all of you, have any recommendations, people that you know, I would like to hear the names, and would love to chat with that person. Or I can also just trust you guys, that if you have somebody you're really passionate about that you'd like to see on the committee, I would be happy to, if you guys would maybe shoot me an email. We'd love to do that.
Council, would we actually be able to do that? I don't think we could.
If you present them at the meeting, that's fine, that's fair game, because if you're doing it offline, now you get a Brown Act problem.
Understood.
Yeah.
Very good.
So I just want to double check that.
But I can always talk to one council member, can't I?
That is true.
Thank you.
But there's one new chair.
So, we have come to that final hour. Item number 12, which I don't think we have any. And now I will call for adjournment at 9:28. Meeting's adjourned.